I was 14 when this occurred, and I'm 22 now, but I still remember it in crisp detail, and it freaks me out to this day, thinking about what would have happened if things had turned out differently. School was out for the summer, and I had convinced my mom to send me to Russia for a couple of months to visit with my grandparents. We had moved to North America when I was little, and I hadn't been back much since. Plus, I thought it would be fun being on my first trip abroad by myself. She agreed, and off I went on my first solo transatlantic journey. My grandparents are great people, and have always spoiled me and my mom rotten. They were ecstatic that their only granddaughter wanted to visit, so they planned a little vacation of their own with me, a month after I arrived, to a popular beach resort city in Turkey. We were to stay at a 5-star resort in Ankara for 2 weeks. I thought that was spectacular, getting to travel to not one but 2 countries in one summer, and to a fancy and exotic place like Turkey too. I was dying to go. But full disclosure, when I arrived to Russia, it wasn't really what I was expecting. My grandparents are really protective people, and I couldn't do much or go anywhere by myself, so it got boring pretty fast, and I spent most of my days playing PSP in my room. I was also accustomed to being active, and wanted to do things like go jogging, which I had done every day at home. I gave my grandparents a hard time about that, since they wouldn't let me go alone, and naturally, they really couldn't keep up. Then after about a month, the time came to go to Turkey, and I was super excited to finally get some freedom and a change of scenery. I had been pent up at home too long. The resort they had picked was sprawled over a pretty large area. However, it was all very well secured and isolated from the rest of the city. And there was also a huge garden on the property, which was ideally suited for jogging. This time, I had my own room separate from my grandparents, so I took the chance to go off by myself and explore the grounds. Most of the time, I would jog in the mornings when it was cooler, with my big old iPod, so I couldn't really hear anything that was going on around me. I figured it was a pretty safe place though, since it was a nice hotel with plenty of tourists. Then I started to notice him. A pretty innocuous-seeming gardener, in his late 40s to early 50s, and in a green uniform. I remember he looked kind of like a shriveled old date from too many years in the sun. He would always wave or say something in broken English as I passed by, while he trimmed the shrubs or mowed the lawn. I would politely wave back, smile, or nod, but I didn't really pay much attention. Fast forward about 10 days, and I was really enjoying myself. It was fun to swim in the pool and the sea. The food was great, and my grandparents had let up a lot, so I could do more by myself. However, they didn't know about my morning runs in the gardens, and I wasn't going to tell them because I was sure they wouldn't approve. So one morning, around 7 a.m. while I'm jogging, I see the gardener again, but this time it's clear he's trying to get my attention. He waves at me and yells something, so I stop and pull out my earphones, trying to figure out what he wants. Now, I know he works for the hotel, so I don't really suspect anything. He waves at me again and motions me to come forward. I'm a bit confused, but I figure he wants to tell me something, so I politely approach. He's standing at a trail that goes deeper into the gardens and foliage. He's smiling and gesturing, and I can see he's holding something in his hand. "Rosa," he says. "Beautiful Rosa." Then I notice that he's holding a rose and extending it to me. At this point I'm confused and a little freaked out by what the hell he's thinking, but I stay put. Usually the hotel staff there are chatty, but nice enough. My grandparents would always get pulled into conversations with them about things. I figure something like this is happening now, and don't want to be rude, but I still want to be on my way without offending the old man. He hands the flower to me and I take it, thinking that maybe he wants to show me some roses that are in bloom. But he just keeps waving and gesturing, like he wants me to follow him. And stupidly, I walk a bit closer. He has another flower in his hand, and he backs away more. Suddenly, he stops and starts to lower a little. That's when I notice that he's holding his other hand behind his back, and he's holding something in it. I look ahead up the trail and see a little cabin type thing, where I assume they keep their gardening supplies. Something clicks in my head, and I instantly back away. He sees me do this and tries to smile, saying Rosa over and over again, and moves the hand he's been holding behind his back while lurching toward me. That's when I see that he's holding some kind of rag. Without hesitation, I drop the rose he handed me, turn around, and run for it at full speed. I don't stop to look back, and run like mad back to the hotel. It's not until the doors finally close behind me, and I'm among other people, that I look back and see if he's followed me. I don't see him anymore, and my heart is beating like crazy. I go back to my hotel room and wait for my grandparents to wake up. I never told them any of what happened that day, and spent the rest of my vacation glued to their side. I thought that if I'd said anything, they would get even more paranoid about my safety, and blame me for wandering off on my own. I also didn't want to ruin the remaining days for them. I saw the gardener once more on the beach. I remembered him talking to a security guard. I remember growing very uncomfortable and sinking into my sun chair when I saw him. Then he looked at me, and he smiled. I scowled at him as he mouthed the words he'd said before tauntingly, and smiled again. I still remember the anger bumbling in my stomach, and how much I wanted to cleave his face in, but I just froze and stared. He walked away, and I went back to pretending nothing ever happened. Needless to say, I never went on any more morning jogs, and neither did I want to, until long after the summer had ended, and I'd returned back home.
I worked the night shift at a hotel, so I've had a ton of weirdos come through, but this is the most recent. Everything started off normally that night. Usually once I check in at 11 p.m., I can just sit back and only see a few people. I'm a loner, so I actually prefer it this way. Anyways, at about 2:30 in the morning, a guy in his 30s comes down and stands in front of me at the desk. I have worked this job for 5 years, so I can pick out the weirdos pretty well, and I knew right away something was off about him. He didn't say anything at first, he just gave me this really creepy stare, so I asked, "Sir, can I help you?" He then mumbled something. All I can make out is the word coffee. I tell him that there's fresh coffee available in the breakfast area behind him. He turns to look, then looks back at me confused. "Do you have some coffee I can take to my room?" My first thought was, great, this guy is drunk as hell. And I told him that he could take a cup of the already made coffee, or I could give him a couple of packs to take to his room. He wanted the packs, so I grabbed a couple and gave them to him, hoping that was all he wanted and I could go back to watching TV. No such luck. He kept standing in front of me, looking at the packets of coffee, confused. I've had enough of drunk guy, so I walk over to the other side of the desk and stare at the TV, completely ignoring him. After a few minutes, he wanders into the breakfast area and stares at the pot of coffee. He then wanders over to the fruit, the cereal, the yogurt, and then back to the coffee, just staring at everything and walking in slow circles. After a while of that, he stops looking at the food and just looks at the ground. He then starts muttering to himself while he's walking in circles. Now he's officially freaking me out. He's at least 6 inches taller than me, 50 pounds heavier, and I'm the only one on shift. I start thinking of escape options, like locking myself in the laundry room or running to the gas station next door. I've had to do it a few times when things have gotten really bad, so I try to plan ahead when someone is giving me bad vibes. About 15 minutes after he starts walking in circles, he heads down the hall, still muttering. I relax a bit, happy that he's gone to bed to pass out, and that I'll have the lobby all to myself again. About 5 minutes later, I glance out of the front doors, and he's right there, staring at me, smoking a cigarette, and still talking to himself. I'm starting to think that he might be high on drugs, and that scares me enough to grab a pair of scissors when he wasn't looking and hold them down by my side. I start thinking about calling the police, but what for? He hasn't done anything, so I decide to just wait it out and hope that he goes to bed soon, since it was after 3 a.m. at that point. For the next 30 minutes, he walks up and down the halls, through the lobby and outside, then comes back through the back door and loops around again. The third time he walks by me, still talking, I was terrified and was on the verge of saying screw it and calling 911 anyway, just to have someone else there with me. Just then, an old woman walks up to the desk and asked me if I could call her a cab. She has no idea how happy I was to see her. I call for her and start chatting her up, very unusual for me, but I was just trying to keep her in the lobby. The weirdo comes around the corner for the 4th time, and the old woman tells him to pack his stuff and that they're leaving because he woke her up and she couldn't go back to sleep. Apparently this old lady was this weird guy's mom, and I felt so much better knowing that he was going to leave as soon as the cab got there. As soon as she told him to go pack his stuff, he got angry. He didn't want to leave. He told her to go back to bed, but she was adamant. And after they argued for a bit, awkward for me just standing there watching, he goes upstairs to pack. She explained to me that she could tell he was getting agitated and that it was time for him to go home. I talked to her for a while and she opened up to me and told me that her son is schizophrenic and she is the only one who can take care of him. She told me that she wished someone would take care of him for just 6 months, like a hospital, to get him on his meds and into a good routine. I felt so bad for her. She seemed so tired and hopeless. I have mental issues myself, so I could relate to the struggle. All of a sudden, weird guy comes running down and demanding to stay. They argue again, except this time he sees me watching and focuses in on me, storming up to the desk and screaming, "She's going to call the cops. I didn't do anything. Are you going to clean my kitchen? Why aren't you sucking my dick yet?" And other horrible things, while I just stood there, stunned. I held up the scissors to defend myself, and his mom screamed, "Stop! Do you even hear what you're saying to her?" He then calmed down just as fast as he had snapped. The cab pulled up, and as much as I felt for his mom, I was happy to see them pull away.
A while ago, I was staying at an upscale hotel in the safe area of a large Midwestern city. I'm a 16-year-old female, and I was in a room all by myself with my parents a few doors down. In theory, this isn't unsafe by any means, but I had bad luck on this particular trip. Our first night there passed without much incident, me in my room and my parents in theirs. I watched a pay-per-view movie and ate way too much from the snack bar. I didn't really have any reason to feel unsafe. The next morning, we did the usual tourist stuff that one does when visiting a new city. As we ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I noticed a man who looked to be in his 60s staring at me for an abnormally long amount of time. I won't lie, as a young, decently attractive female, I'm used to getting the occasional inappropriate look from a guy, so I ignored it and chalked it up to him either being a perv or thinking that I looked like his granddaughter or something. The next night, my parents allowed me to meet up with a friend for dinner who lived in the area. He met me in the hotel lobby, and we had a nice dinner and then went back to the hotel for drinks. Yes, I'm underage. I had a drink. Shoot me now. Coincidentally, the same man who had been eyeing me earlier was at the bar. And this time, I knew I didn't remind him of his granddaughter. Even with my buff guy friend next to me, his eyes traced every curve of my body. I felt unsettled and mentioned it to my friend, Ethan, who glanced over and also seemed really weirded out by how obvious this guy was leering. We left the bar quickly, and by now it was around 12:30 a.m. Ethan walked me to the elevators of the hotel, and once I pushed the button, left. I wished I would have asked him to stay, because no sooner than he had walked away, my creeper came rounding the corner and stood there waiting with me for the elevator. I felt so uncomfortable knowing that he would be seeing what floor I was going to, but it hadn't occurred to me to just get off on a different floor at the time. And even if it did, he planned on following me, so it would have just been as bad a move. When we were in the elevator together, I tried to keep my eyes averted from his, but they literally bore into my body. He kept trying to step closer, and I kept backing up, too scared to even speak. What freaked me out even more was that he hadn't pressed a separate elevator button, so he planned on getting off when I did. When I got to my floor, I almost ran to my room, and the guy just stood at the end of the hallway, waiting to see where I was going. I stayed in my room for 15 minutes until I was sure he was gone, before I told my parents what had happened. But there was no sign of the guy, and it was really late, so I just locked my door and tried to get some sleep. I had almost tripped it off when I heard a knock at my door. Now, I'm not an idiot. I've creeped the subreddit and no sleep for a long time, so I didn't just go and open the door at nearly 2 a.m. Instead, I turned on the light and froze. At this point, my intuition had kicked in, and I knew it was the guy. I was near tears, but the knocking kept coming, harder and harder, so I finally shouted and asked who it was. The voice that replied to me was the most chilling thing that I've ever heard. It was high-pitched but growly, almost giggly, and so disturbing that I can barely describe it. "It's hotel staff. Please let me in." I was terrified. A look through the peephole confirmed that it was the same creepy old guy. I locked myself in the bathroom and called my dad's phone. He has a habit of always keeping his ringer on, so he answered me almost immediately, and I tried to tell him what was wrong through my tears. "The guy from before," I managed, "is at my door." What happened next gives me nightmares. My dad naturally went into superhero mode and opened his door to find the old man in just a robe masturbating. It's pretty obvious to piece together what he was planning, and I still dream about it and have severe PTSD from it. My dad slugged the dude in the face and made sure he didn't move an inch while my mom called hotel security. We pressed charges, and I'm pretty sure the guy's in prison now for what I think are assault with intent to commit rape charges. But I guess I could be wrong.
I was working at a Holiday Inn in Omaha, Nebraska, back in my college days. Normally, I was a bellman, but sometimes I would work the front desk. One day, a very odd-looking guy comes up to the desk. He was wearing clothes straight out of the 1970s, like a super creepy version of Dan from The Good Guys. He had on aviators, with greasy hair and a massively receding hairline, topped off with a mustache. He had a cane and walked with a pretty severe limp. He asked me where he could get some paramedic patches. He says he was called into town on special assignment to help out with paramedic duties, but they made him provide his own patches. This all seemed pretty damn odd to me, so I told him that I didn't know where he could buy them, and he eventually left. Later, I got a call to a room to check out the hot water. There was a report that the hot water wasn't working, and that it was coming out cold. I went to the room, knocked on the door, and an old lady in a nightgown answered. I introduced myself, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, motionless. Her mouth was open the whole time, the way you would imagine a lobotomized person would look. I saw a motionless pair of legs lying on the bed, but I didn't look around the corner to check it out. I went into the bathroom, turned on the water, and it was instantly extremely hot. The old lady never said a word. I told her that the hot water was working just fine, and I quickly left the room. Later, the creepy man from before arrives back up at the front desk, complaining that he had called about the hot water not working in his room. Naturally, I connected the dots. Oh God, not this mindset set in. I followed him back to his room at an extremely slow pace. He was very dependent on his cane. When we got to the room, the old lady was still standing there, still agape in her nightgown. This time I could see that the pair of legs on the bed were attached to an old man, now sitting. The old man sat there motionless, also agape, and not saying a word, just looking at me. I explained to the creepy man that I had already been there and the hot water was working just fine. The weird part was he didn't even care about the water. He got out a duffel bag. From the bag, he pulled out a stuffed Bugs Bunny doll. He held it out at arm's length and offered it to me. I reached out for it, not knowing why, and he pulled back in a very "mine, don't touch it" kind of manner. He then held it out to me again, as if he were offering it to me. I reluctantly reached out to grab it, and once again, he pulled it back. The old man and woman just kept staring at us, not saying a word, but smiling with their mouths open and making laughing sounds. That's the best I can describe them. The creepy man then took out a Donald Duck doll from his bag, held it out to me. I didn't reach for it. He kept holding it out and holding it out. So I eventually reached for it. He immediately pulled it away with the same "you can't have it" type of reaction. I then backed out of the door and told them to have a nice day, and I never saw them again. Hotel people can be creepy as hell, especially when they offer you stuffed animals.
What's up, guys? Blue Spooky here. I just wanted to thank you all for watching, especially if you made it to the end here. Got a couple of updates for the channel for you this video. We've been growing really fast lately, which is pretty awesome. Getting like 1,000 subscribers a day, already over 40,000, which is 10,000 past my entire summer goal, so that's pretty good. But with this increase of viewership, it means that I'm getting a lot more emails and a lot more comments. A lot more than I can actually handle answering right now. So from now on the channel, I'm not going to be answering the comments as often, and I'm not going to be answering all of them. I hope you guys understand. I'm still going to try and answer as many of them as I can, but I just say it's very stressful trying to answer all of them and spending like 2 or 3 hours just getting to thousands of comments, so yeah, I hope you guys can understand that and that you'll forgive me for that. As a replacement, I'm thinking about maybe doing like a weekly or bi-weekly Q&A where all the questions you guys have, I can just look through the comments on like an update video. You guys can ask whatever you want and I'll just answer it then, all at the same time, so that it's a bit easier on me. Let me know what you guys think about that. Another update I would like to mention is that I'm going to start doing no sleep and creepypasta stories now. I'm going to mix them in the odd days in between when I do true scary stories, just to see how the reception is. So look forward to that. Next week is when I'll probably do the first one, so let me know what you guys think about that. I'd like to give a special thanks this episode to my co-narrator, Unit number 522. He's one of the guys that got me started on YouTube, and he's been helping me a lot along the way. He's a pretty great guy, and he's got some pretty great narrations, so if you like his stuff, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below, and you can go ahead and check him out, go support him, watch his videos. In addition, in the description, I'll have a link to a collaboration that he posted on his channel with me recently. It's a camping story, so if you guys like those, you should enjoy that. If you have any stories that you'd like me to read or any personal stories that you'd like to send in, a link to my social media will be in the description below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. If you want to share a story, go ahead and send it to me on any of those. Include in the tagline how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in, and also what the story is about, if there's any themes. If you are curious about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description in the order in which it appears in the video. So if you guys are curious about the music, just look down there, it's right there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry about the bad news about the comments. I hope you guys have a great day.